The rain stung their faces like needles. But the real pain was the envelope in Caleb's hand, its edges already soggy from the downpour. 3 identical face 22 years old, dark-eyed, and hollowed by betrayal stared at the check inside, $1 million. The price of their family's rejection. This is it. Then, whispered Eli, the youngest by minutes, his voice barely audible over the New York City storm. They stood in an alley off Bleecker Street. The triplets Caleb, Eli, and Noah shivering in clothes too thin for the autumn chill. Just hours ago, they'd been summoned to their father's penthouse, expecting a confrontation, maybe even reconciliation. Instead, Richard Hargrove, steel magnate and patriarch, had handed them a single check and a colder truth. You're no sons of mine. Their crime. Being gay. All 3 of them. A fact they'd hidden until a cruel outing at a family gala exposed their secret to a room full of sneering elites. Caleb, the eldest, always the protector, crumpled the check in his fist. He thinks this buys our silence. Our shame, he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the rain. He's wrong. Noah, the quiet dreamer, touched Caleb's arm, his hazel eyes searching for hope where none seemed to exist. What do we do now? He asked, his voice trembling. Eli, the firebrand, kicked a nearby dumpster, the clang echoing like a gunshot. We fight. We live. We show him who we are. The triplets had always been inseparable, bound not just by blood, but by a shared resilience forged in the shadow of their father's expectations. Growing up in the Hargrove mansion in upstate New York, they'd navigated a world of rigid masculinity, private schools, and carefully curated futures. Richard had groomed them to inherit his empire. Oblivious to the truth they'd each discovered in their teens, they loved men, fiercely and unapologetically. They'd kept it secret, whispering their fears and dreams in the dead of night, until a vindictive cousin caught Eli kissing his boyfriend at the gala and turned their world to ash. Now, disowned and homeless, they faced a city that didn't care. The $1 million could buy them a start, but it came with strings a non-disclosure agreement to never speak of their family again. Caleb tore the check in half, letting the pieces fall into a puddle. We don't need his money, he said, though his stomach nodded at the lie. They had nothing but each other, and the weight of that truth was crushing. They found shelter in a dingy hostel in the village, pooling their last few dollars for a shared bunk. The room smelled of mildew and regret, but it was theirs. As they lay awake, the hum of the city outside, Eli broke the silence. We're free now, aren't we? His voice held a fragile hope. Noah, sketching in a battered notebook, nodded slowly. Free to be us. But free to starve, too. Caleb stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Freedom was a word too heavy for their empty pockets, but he wouldn't let his brothers see his doubt. We'll make it, he promised. Together. The next morning, they hit the streets, their differences shaping their survival. Caleb, practical and fierce, scouted for jobs, his charm masking his desperation as he talked his way into a barista gig at a queer-friendly cafe. Eli, ever defiant, buskied on subway platforms, his guitar riffs drawing crowds and coins. Noah, the artist, sold sketches in Washington Square Park, his delicate lines capturing the city's soul. They scraped by, their bond tightening with every shared meal of cheap ramen, every laugh stolen from the jaws of despair. But the city wasn't kind. A week later, Caleb's boss fired him for refusing a bigot's advances. Eli's guitar was stolen by a junkie in a subway scuffle. Noah's sketches were ruined in a sudden rain, his dreams smudged into the pavement. Each setback hit like a fist, but they refused to break. They found solace in the city's underground queer scene, a patchwork of clubs and safe houses where chosen families thrived. There, they met Jamie, a trans bartender with a sharp wit and a warm smile, who offered them a couch in his tiny Brooklyn apartment. "You're not alone," Jamie said, handing them beers. "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up." Caleb felt a spark when Jamie's hand brushed his, a dangerous hope he hadn't allowed himself since their disownment. Eli teased him mercilessly, but Noah saw the truth. Caleb was falling, and it scared him. Love, in their world, felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. Yet Jamie's presence became their anchor, his laughter a reminder that joy could exist even in the wreckage. By month's end, they'd clawed their way to a fragile stability. Caleb landed a job at a community center, teaching self-defense to queer youth. Eli joined a street band, his music gaining a small but loyal following. Noah's art caught the eye of a gallery owner, who offered him a spot in a group show. They were surviving, but the shadow of their father's rejection loomed large. Rumors swirled that Richard Hargrove was expanding his empire, his name plastered across billboards, a constant reminder of the life they'd lost. One night, over takeout in Jamie's cramped kitchen, Eli slammed his fist on the table. "He doesn't get to win," he said, his voice thick with anger. "We're still here. Still us. We'll build something he can't touch." Noah nodded, his pencil sketching a vision of the three of them. Older, stronger, unbroken. Caleb looked at Jamie, then at his brothers, and felt a fire kindle in his chest. "We'll do more than survive," he said. "We'll thrive." Their vow was tested when a lawyer arrived at Jamie's door, bearing a new offer from their father, $10 million to disappear forever. The triplets stared at the contract, its weight heavier than the check they'd torn up. "He's scared," Caleb realized aloud. "Scared of what we could become." Eli grinned, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Good. Let's make him terrified." The lawyer's visit left a chill in Jamie's apartment, the contract's crisp pages still on the table like an unwelcome guest. Caleb burned it in the sink, the flames licking up the promise of $10 million. But the act didn't erase the sting of their father's fear. "He thinks we're a threat," Noah said, his voice soft but certain, sketching the lawyer's retreating figure in his notebook. The triplets doubled down, their defiance fueling a new purpose. Caleb threw himself into the community center, where queer teens kids like they'd been looked to him for strength. He taught them to block punches, but also to stand tall against a world that tried to shrink them. One kid, a shy 15-year-old named Marcus, reminded Caleb of Noah, all quiet dreams and hidden scars. "You ever feel like giving up?" Marcus asked one day, his voice barely a whisper. Caleb knelt, meeting his eyes. "Every day? But you keep going for the ones who can't." Eli's band, the Outcasts, gained traction in Brooklyn's dive bars, their raw, rebellious sound drawing crowds of misfits. He wrote songs about the triplets' pain lyrics of betrayal, love, and survival that hit like a punch. At one gig, a producer slipped him a card, whispering about a record deal. Eli laughed it off, but later, alone with his brothers, he admitted, "I want this. Not for fame. For us." Noah, whose art was now hanging in a small Soho gallery, nodded. "Then do it. Make him hear us." Noah's gallery show was a quiet triumph. His charcoal portraits of queer New Yorkers drag queens, activists, lovers selling out to local collectors. The gallery owner, a gruff lesbian named Carla, saw something in Noah's work, truth. "You're not just drawing faces," she told him. "You're drawing souls." Noah blushed, but her words stuck, pushing him to dream bigger. He started a series called Disowned, each piece a raw depiction of their story, Their pain splashed across canvas in stark blacks and vivid reds. Jamie became their rock, his apartment a sanctuary where they could be messy, human, and whole. Caleb's feelings for him deepened, though he kept them buried under the weight of their struggle. One night, after a long shift, Jamie caught Caleb staring. "What's that look?" Jamie teased, his smile soft. Caleb froze, then mumbled, "Just glad you're here." Jamie's hand lingered on his, and for a moment, the world felt less heavy. But their father's shadow crept closer. A tabloid ran a hit piece, outing the triplets as the disgraced Hargrove heirs, twisting their story into scandal. The article didn't name them directly, but the details: triplets, gay, disowned were unmistakable. Caleb's community center faced threats. Eli's gigs were heckled, and Noah's gallery got anonymous hate mail. "He's behind this," Eli growled, pacing. "He's trying to bury us." Noah, usually calm, slammed his sketchbook shut. "Then we dig ourselves out." They leaned on their chosen family. Carla rallied local artists to support Noah, turning his Disowned series into a city-wide exhibit. Jamie's bar became a hub for queer resistance, hosting fundraisers to counter the threats. Marcus and the other teens at Caleb's center started a petition, demanding the tabloid retract the story. The triplets weren't alone anymore, but the fight was exhausting. Late nights found them on Jamie's fire escape, sharing cigarettes and dreams of a future where they weren't defined by their father's hate. Caleb took a risk, asking Jamie out for coffee, just the two of them. Under the dim lights of a diner, Jamie's laughter felt like sunlight. "Your trouble, Caleb Hargrove," Jamie said, his eyes warm. Caleb's heart raced, but fear held him back. "Trouble's all I've got," he joked, deflecting. Jamie's hand found his under the table. "I like trouble." Eli's band landed a small record deal, their first single climbing local charts. Noah's exhibit drew crowds, his art sparking conversations about family, identity, and resilience. Caleb's center became a haven, its walls covered in Noah's sketches and Eli's lyrics. They were building something, piece by piece, but the cost was steep. Sleepless nights, empty bank accounts, and the constant threat of their father's reach wore them down. Then came the next blow, a cease and desist letter from Hargrove Industries, accusing them of defaming the family name. Attached was another offer: $20 million to leave New York and never speak of their past. Caleb read the letter aloud, his voice steady but his hands shaking. Eli laughed bitterly. "He's desperate." Noah's eyes darkened. "He's not stopping us. He's stopping himself." They tore up the letter, but the weight of it lingered. Caleb looked at his brothers, their faces mirror images of his own, and felt a surge of pride. They'd lost everything, but they'd found each other and something more. "We're not his pawns," Caleb said. "We're writing our own story." The cease and desist letter was a declaration of war, and the triplets fought back with everything they had. Caleb organized a protest outside Hargrove Industries' Manhattan headquarters, joined by Marcus and a dozen queer teens from the community center. They held signs with Noah's art and chanted Eli's lyrics, their voices echoing off the glass skyscraper. Passers-by stopped, some joining, others sneering, but the triplets stood tall, their identical faces a defiant symbol of unity. The protest made local news, a small victory that felt monumental. Caleb's heart swelled as Marcus, usually so shy, shouted, "We're here, we're queer, and we're not going anywhere." But the high was short-lived. That night, vandals trashed the community center, spray painting slurs across the walls. Caleb arrived at dawn, his stomach dropping at the sight. Noah, beside him, picked up a broken chair, and whispered, "This is him, isn't it?" Caleb nodded, his jaw tight. "He's trying to scare us." Eli's response was to pour his rage into music. The Outcasts' next gig was electric. Their setlist a raw scream against their father's cruelty. Eli's voice cracked on the final song, a ballad about chosen family, and the crowd roared, some crying, others raising fists. A scout from a major label was there, offering a meeting. Eli hesitated. Fame was tempting, but he feared losing the raw honesty that defined them. "This is for us, not him," he told his brothers later, his voice fierce. "I won't let him twist it." Noah's Disowned series became a sensation, picked up by a national art blog. Galleries in Chicago and San Francisco wanted to show his work, but the attention brought new threats. Anonymous emails warned him to stop, accusing him of exploiting the Hargrove name. One night, a brick crashed through the gallery window, narrowly missing Noah's latest piece. Carla, the gallery owner, hugged him tight. "They're scared of you, kid. Keep going." Noah did, his art growing bolder, each stroke a middle finger to their father's empire. Jamie was their haven through the chaos. His apartment, now crowded with their belongings, felt like home. Caleb's feelings for him were undeniable, but fear of losing another piece of his heart kept him distant. One evening, as they washed dishes together, Jamie bumped his shoulder playfully. "You're gonna have to let me in sometime, tough guy," he said, his voice gentle. Caleb's throat tightened. "What if I mess it up?" Jamie's smile was soft. "Certain. You won't." The triplets' lives were a delicate balance of fight and fragility. Caleb's center rebuilt, stronger, with donations pouring in from allies moved by their story. Eli's band recorded their first EP, its release party packed with fans who saw themselves in the music. Noah's art toured, his name whispered in art circles as a voice for the marginalized. But every step forward came with a cost. Their father's lawyers sent another letter, this time threatening lawsuits for slander. The offer was now $30 million, with a warning, "This is your last chance." Caleb burned the letter, but the words haunted him. He saw the exhaustion in his brother's eyes, Eli's sleepless nights, Noah's trembling hands. They were winning, but at what price? One night, on Jamie's fire escape, Noah broke down, his voice raw. "What if we can't keep this up? What if he breaks us?" Eli, usually the firebrand, was quiet, his hand on Noah's shoulder. Caleb spoke, his voice steady. "He can't break us. We're not just surviving anymore. We're living." They leaned on their community. Carla connected Noah with an activist group planning a queer art festival. Marcus and the teens helped Caleb repaint the center, turning the vandalized walls into a mural of pride. Eli's band played free gigs for queer youth, their music a lifeline. Jamie, always there, cooked them dinner, his laughter easing the weight of their fight. Caleb finally let himself kiss Jamie under the stars, a moment of quiet joy that felt like a rebellion. But their father wasn't done. A new article surfaced, this time in a national outlet, painting the triplets as greedy opportunists milking their disownment for fame. The lies cut deep, especially when Marcus showed Caleb hate comments online, calling them disgraces. Eli wanted to sue, but Noah stopped him. "We don't fight lies with lawyers," he said. "We fight with truth." They planned their boldest move yet, a public art and music event, combining Noah's Disowned series with Eli's music, hosted at Caleb's Center. It was a risk exposing themselves further, but they were done hiding. As they prepared, Caleb felt Jamie's hand in his, Noah's quiet strength, Eli's burning passion. They were triplets, forged in pain, but bound by love. "This is our story," Caleb said, his voice fierce. "And we're telling it our way." The event was their battle cry, a collision of art, music, and defiance in the heart of Brooklyn. Caleb's community center buzzed with energy, its walls alive with Noah's Disowned series canvases of raw pain and radiant hope. Eli's band took the stage, their music a pulse that drew hundreds, queer youth, allies, artists, and strangers united by the Triplet story. Noah stood at the back, sketching the crowd, his heart racing. Eli's voice soared, singing of freedom. Caleb, watching from the sidelines with Jamie's hand in his, felt something new, pride, not just in his brothers, but in himself. The night wasn't flawless. Hecklers shouted slurs from the street, and a news van lingered, sniffing for scandal. But the crowd drowned them out, their cheers a wall of sound. Marcus, now a confident 16, emceed, his voice steady as he introduced Noah's art. "This is what family looks like," he said, gesturing to the triplets. The room erupted, and for a moment, the world felt right. The event went viral. Clips of Eli's performance and Noah's art flooding social media. Hashtags like Disowned but Unbroken trended, and donations poured into the community center. Caleb used the funds to expand programs, hiring counselors for queer youth. Eli's band was offered a national tour, and Noah's art was courted by major galleries. They were no longer just surviving, they were shaping a movement. But their father struck back. A week later, Hargrove Industries announced a charity initiative for at-risk youth, a blatant attempt to steal their thunder. The press ate it up, praising Richard Hargrove as a philanthropist while ignoring his sons. Then came the lawsuits, one against Noah for defamation through his art, another against Eli's band for copyright infringement on lyrics that echoed their family's story. Caleb's center was hit with zoning violations. A clear setup. "They're scared," Jamie said, pouring coffee as the triplets read the legal papers. "You're too loud now." Caleb nodded, but his hands shook. The lawsuits could bankrupt them, shut down everything they'd built. Eli wanted to fight in court, but Noah hesitated. "What if we lose everything?" he asked, his voice small. Caleb looked at his brothers, then at Jamie, and made a choice. "We don't back down. We find a way." They hired a lawyer, a fierce queer woman named Lena who worked pro bono. She dug into Hargrove Industries, uncovering shady deals and tax evasions. "Your father's not untouchable," Lena said, her eyes gleaming. "He's sloppy." Her findings gave them leverage, but not enough to stop the lawsuits. They needed something bigger, a way to expose Richard's hypocrisy to the world. Noah had an idea, a new art piece, a massive mural to be unveiled at the Queer Art Festival. It would depict their father's empire crumbling, with the triplets rising from the ruins. Eli wrote a song to accompany it, a searing anthem called Unbroken. Caleb rallied the community, turning the festival into a protest against corporate greed and homophobia. The plan was risky. Richard could bury them in legal fees, but they were all in. Jamie's support never wavered. He and Caleb were now a couple, their love a quiet strength amid the chaos. One night, as they lay in bed, Jamie traced Caleb's jaw. "You're carrying too much," he whispered. Caleb sighed, his voice raw. "I have to. For them." Jamie kissed him softly. "You're not alone." The festival was days away when disaster struck. The community center was raided by city officials, citing safety violations. Equipment was seized, and Caleb's programs were suspended. Eli's band lost their tour deal when promoters caved to pressure from Hargrove's allies. Noah's mural site was vandalized, the wall defaced with hate. The triplets stood among the wreckage, their dream crumbling. He's winning, Noah whispered, tears falling. Eli kicked a broken easel, cursing. Caleb pulled them close, his voice steady. He hasn't won yet. Lena uncovered a lead, a whistleblower from Hargrove Industries, a former executive willing to talk. He claimed Richard had funneled millions into anti-LGBT lobbying while publicly posing as an ally. The triplets saw their chance. They met the whistleblower, a nervous man named Paul, in a diner at midnight. His evidence emails, financial records was damning. "He'll destroy me for this," Paul said, his hands shaking. Caleb met his eyes. "He's already tried to destroy us. Help us stop him." With Paul's evidence, they rebuilt. Noah repainted the mural, bolder and fiercer. Eli's band booked a new gig, crowdsourcing funds. Caleb reopened the center, defying the city with community support. The festival loomed, their last stand. They weren't just fighting for themselves anymore, they were fighting for every kid like Marcus, every artist like Noah, every dreamer like Eli. Caleb looked at his brothers, their faces lit by determination, and knew they'd never give up. The Queer Art Festival was a battlefield of color and sound, held in a sprawling Brooklyn warehouse. Noah's mural dominated the space, a towering depiction of a crumbling Hargrove Industries logo, with 3 silhouetted figures rising, hands clasped, against a sky of vibrant pride colors. Eli's band played beneath it, their anthem unbroken, shaking the walls. Caleb stood among the crowd, Jamie at his side, watching hundreds chant their names. Marcus, now a festival volunteer, grinned from the stage, his pride a mirror of their own. The whistleblower's evidence was their secret weapon. Lena had leaked it to a trusted journalist, and as Eli's final chord rang out, the story broke online. Hargrove Industries linked to anti-LGBT lobbying. The crowd buzzed, phones lighting up with notifications. Noah's mural, projected on screens, became the story's backdrop, its imagery searing into public consciousness. By morning, Hargrove hypocrisy was trending, and Richard's empire was under fire. The backlash was swift. Protesters gathered outside Hargrove's headquarters, echoing the triplets' earlier stand. News outlets dug deeper, uncovering more of Richard's shady deals. His stock plummeted, and his board scrambled to distance themselves. The triplets watched it unfold from Jamie's apartment, their faces a mix of shock and triumph. "We did this," Eli said, his voice hoarse. Noah nodded, sketching their victory in real time. Caleb squeezed Jamie's hand, his heart pounding. "We're not done yet." Richard's lawyers doubled down, filing injunctions to silence the triplets. But Lena was relentless, countersuing for harassment and defamation. The community rallied. Carla's artist friends spread Noah's work. Eli's fans streamed Unbroken nonstop, and Caleb's teens organized vigils outside the center. The triplets were no longer just 3 disowned sons. They were a symbol, their story a spark for change. But the fight took its toll. Caleb collapsed from exhaustion, waking in a hospital bed with Jamie at his side. "You can't carry it all," Jamie said, his voice breaking. Caleb gripped his hand, tears falling. "I don't know how to stop." Noah and Eli visited, their faces pale. Noah admitted he hadn't slept in days, haunted by the fear of losing their momentum. Eli's bravado cracked, his voice small. "What if we've pushed too far?" They found strength in each other. Noah's next piece, a portrait of the triplets embracing, was auctioned for charity, raising funds to keep the center alive. Eli's band released Unbroken as a single, donating proceeds to queer youth shelters. Caleb, recovering, led a workshop on resilience, his voice steady as he told the teens, You are enough. Marcus, listening, hugged him afterward. You saved me, he whispered. Caleb shook his head. We saved each other. Richard's next move was desperate, a public apology, televised and tearful, claiming he'd misunderstood his sons. He offered $50 million to make amends, with a catch they'd have to drop all public criticism. The triplets watched the broadcast in disbelief. He's buying silence, Noah said, his pencil snapping. Eli laughed bitterly. He thinks we're that cheap. Caleb's eyes hardened. Let's show him what we're worth. They planned a final act, a documentary, combining Noah's art, Eli's music, and Caleb's community work, telling their story unfiltered. A queer filmmaker, inspired by their fight, offered to direct. They poured everything into it: late nights editing, raw interviews, tears and laughter. Jamie, ever their anchor, kept them grounded, his love for Caleb a quiet strength. One night, as they watched footage, Caleb kissed him fiercely. You're my home, he said, meaning it. The documentary premiered at a queer film festival, drawing thousands. It was raw, unflinching, showing the triplets' pain, their love, their unbreakable bond. Clips of their father's hypocrisy played alongside their triumphs. Noah's art and Eli's music weaving their story into something universal. The audience stood, tears streaming, as the credits rolled. Marcus, in the front row, led the applause, his face alight with pride. Richard's empire crumbled further. Lawsuits from former employees piled up, and his board ousted him. The triplets documentary went viral, picked up by streaming platforms. Offers poured in: book deals, speaking tours, gallery shows. They were no longer just the disowned Hargrove triplets. They were Caleb, Eli, and Noah, architects of their own legacy. But the fight wasn't over. A new letter arrived, this time from Richard himself, not his lawyers. It was short, handwritten. I was wrong. Meet me. The triplets stared at it, their hearts torn between hope and distrust. Caleb spoke first, his voice steady. We decide our ending, not him. Richard's letter burned in Caleb's pocket as they debated what to do. The triplets sat in Jamie's kitchen, the city's hum outside a reminder of how far they'd come. Noah wanted to ignore it, his trust in their father long gone. He's cornered, he said, sketching angrily. This is another trick. Eli, pacing, disagreed. Let's face him. Show him we're not afraid. Caleb, torn, looked at Jamie, who squeezed his hand. Whatever you choose. I'm here, Jamie said. Caleb nodded, his decision made. We meet him. On our terms. They chose a neutral Spoda quiet diner in Queens, far from their father's Manhattan empire. Richard arrived alone. No lawyers. His face gaunt, eyes hollow. The triplets sat across from him, their identical features a mirror of defiance. I made mistakes, Richard began, his voice low. I want to make it right. He slid an envelope across the table, $75 million. No strings attached. Caleb didn't touch it. You think money fixes this? He asked, his voice ice. Richard spoke of regret, of pressure from his board, of a world he didn't understand. But his words felt hollow, rehearsed. Noah's eyes narrowed. You didn't just disown us. You tried to erase us. Eli leaned forward, his voice sharp. You funded hate. You don't get to cry now. Richard flinched, but Caleb saw something else: fear. Their father wasn't just seeking forgiveness. He was seeking control. One last time. They left the envelope on the table, walking out into the night. The city felt alive. Their city, not his. Back at Jamie's, they burned the letter. The act a ritual of closure. He doesn't own us, Noah said, his voice steady. Eli grinned. Never did. Caleb pulled them into a hug. Their bond unbreakable. They'd faced their father and walked away stronger. The documentary's success propelled them further. Noah's art was now in museums. His Disowned series a cultural touchstone. Eli's band toured nationally, their music a rallying cry for queer youth. Caleb's center expanded, opening a second location with Marcus as a youth leader. They were building a legacy, not of wealth, but of love and resilience. Jamie, now a partner in every sense, helped Caleb navigate the spotlight, their relationship a quiet anchor. But fame brought new challenges. Paparazzi hounded them, twisting their story into clickbait. Hate groups targeted their events, and the lawsuits lingered, draining their resources. Lena, their lawyer, fought tirelessly, but the strain showed. One night, she called with news. Richard was bankrupt. His empire sold off to pay debts. The lawsuits against the triplets were dropped, but a new offer came $90 million from a Hargrove ally, asking them to move on quietly. The offer was tempting. Noah's health was faltering, stress etching lines into his face. Eli's band faced burnout, their tour grueling. Caleb's center struggled with funding, despite its growth. They sat on Jamie's fire escape, the city glittering below, and weighed their options. This could give us freedom, Noah said, his voice tired. Eli shook his head. It's not freedom. It's a cage with better wallpaper. Caleb looked at Jamie, then his brothers. We've come too far to sell out. They rejected the offer, doubling down on their work. Noah launched a scholarship for queer artists, funding it with his art sales. Eli's band released a new album, Defiant, dedicating it to their community. Caleb partnered with Lena to create a legal fund for queer youth facing discrimination. Their story, once a wound, was now a beacon, inspiring others to fight. Marcus, now 17, spoke at a rally, his voice echoing Caleb's strength. We're not just surviving, he said. We're thriving. One evening, as they celebrated the center's new location, Jamie proposed to Caleb in front of everyone. The room fell silent, then erupted in cheers as Caleb said yes, tears streaming. Noah and Eli tackled them in a hug, their laughter echoing. For the first time, the triplets felt whole not because of their father's downfall, but because of the family they'd built. Yet Richard's shadow lingered. A final letter arrived, not from him, but from his estate. He died, alone, his fortune gone. Inside was one last offer, $100 million, from a hidden trust, to in the Hargrove name. The triplets stared at it, their hearts heavy. Caleb spoke first. This isn't about him anymore. It's about us. The news of Richard's death hit like a stone dropped in still water ripples of relief, grief, and unresolved pain. The triplets sat in Jamie's apartment, the final offer of $100 million on the table, its weight heavier than any before. Noah traced the envelope's edge, his voice quiet. He's gone, but he's still trying to control us. Eli's jaw tightened. Let's burn it. Caleb, holding Jamie's hand, shook his head. No. We use it. They didn't want the money for themselves. Instead, they saw a chance to turn their father's last act into something meaningful. They met with Lena, sketching a plan to create a foundation for queer youth, funding shelters, scholarships, and legal aid. We'll call it Unbroken, Noah said, his eyes bright with purpose. Eli grinned. Make his money save the people he tried to break. Caleb nodded, his heart full. It's not his legacy anymore. It's ours. The Unbroken Foundation launched with a press conference that drew global attention. Caleb spoke first, his voice steady, telling their story: disownment, survival, triumph. Noah unveiled a new mural, Legacy, depicting queer youth rising from ashes, their faces radiant. Eli performed Unbroken, the anthem now a global hit. Its lyrics a promise: we'll rise, we'll fight, we'll never fade. The crowd, 1,000 strong, roared, their cheers a testament to the triplets' impact. The foundation transformed their work. Caleb's community centers expanded to 5 cities, offering safe spaces and job training. Noah's scholarships sent queer artists to school, their work shaping a new generation. Eli's band partnered with the foundation, touring to raise funds, their music a bridge between communities. Jamie, now Caleb's fiancée, ran logistics, his steady presence keeping them grounded. Marcus, nearly 18, became a youth ambassador, his story inspiring others. But the money came with whispers. Some accused the triplets of selling out, claiming they'd taken their father's hush money. The criticism stung, especially for Noah, who poured his pain into a new series, Truth. His art, raw and unflinching, showed the cost of their fight: sleepless nights, lost dreams, fractured hearts. At its unveiling, he spoke to the crowd. This money isn't silence. It's a megaphone. Eli faced his own battles. The band's fame brought pressure: labels wanted polished pop, not raw rebellion. He fought to keep their sound authentic, writing late into the night, his lyrics a lifeline. One song, Brothers, was for Caleb and Noah, a love letter to their bond. At a concert, he dedicated it to them, tears in his eyes as the crowd sang along. Caleb and Noah, in the wings, hugged him after, their pride unspoken but fierce. Caleb's engagement to Jamie became a beacon of hope. Their wedding was small, held at the community center, surrounded by chosen family. Noah designed the invitations. Eli wrote a song for the ceremony, and Marcus officiated, his voice cracking with joy. As Caleb and Jamie danced, the triplets shared a locus silent vow that they'd made it together. The foundation's impact grew, but so did the challenges. Hate groups targeted their centers, and funding gaps loomed. Lena uncovered attempts to sabotage the foundation, linked to former Hargrove allies. The triplets fought back, their resilience a fire that wouldn't die. They held rallies, spoke on global stages, and refused to let their father's shadow dim their light. One night, on the anniversary of their disownment, they returned to the Bleecker Street alley where it all began. The rain was gone, the city alive with possibility. Noah sketched the alley, capturing its grit and grace. Eli played a soft melody on his guitar, a song of survival. Caleb held Jamie's hand, his brothers at his side, and spoke. We were never his. We were always ours. The $100 million was nearly gone, poured into the foundation's work. They'd turned their father's final act into a legacy of love, but the cost was etched into them: scars of a fight that never fully ended. Yet they stood taller, their bond unbreakable, their purpose clear. The world knew their names, not as Hargrove heirs, but as Caleb, Eli, and Noah triplets who turned pain into power. As they left the alley, a new offer came, this time from a publisher, a book deal to tell their story. They looked at each other, their faces lit by streetlights, and nodded. One last time, Caleb said, "Let's tell the world who we are." The book deal was their final stand, a chance to etch their truth into history. Titled Unbroken, the triplets fight for freedom. It wove their story: disownment, defiance, and the family they built. Caleb wrote of resilience, Noah of art's power, Eli of music's rebellion. They worked late into the night. Jamie brewing coffee, Marcus reading drafts, Lena fact-checking. The process was raw, reopening old wounds. But it was theirs. The book launched to a sold-out crowd at the community center, now a flagship for the Unbroken Foundation. Noah's mural, Legacy, hung behind them, its vibrant colors a testament to their journey. Eli performed Brothers, his voice breaking as he sang of their bond. Caleb spoke last, his hand in Jamie's, his words for every queer kid in the room. "You are enough," he said. "Your story matters." Marcus, now a college freshman, led the applause, his eyes shining. The book became a bestseller, translated into a dozen languages, its message resonating globally. The foundation grew, opening centers in 10 cities, funding thousands of queer youth. Noah's art was in permanent collections. Eli's band headlined festivals, and Caleb's work earned him a humanitarian award. They were no longer defined by their father's rejection, but by the lives they'd touched. Yet the past lingered. Hate mail still came, and some nights, Noah woke from nightmares of their disownment. Eli poured his anger into new songs, each one fiercer. Caleb, with Jamie's love, found peace, but the weight of leadership never left him. They carried their scars proudly, proof of their survival. One spring evening, they returned to the Bleecker Street alley, now a mural site for Noah's work. The city had changed, softer somehow, or maybe they had. Noah's latest piece was their portrait of 3 boys, hands clasped, faces alight with hope. Below it, a plaque read, "For every disowned heart, you are unbroken." Eli strummed his guitar, a quiet melody. Caleb held Jamie close, their wedding bands glinting. They'd turned $100 million into a movement, their father's final attempt at control into a legacy of love. The world knew their story not as victims, but as victors. Marcus, now a leader in his own right, joined them, his smile wide. "You did it," he said. The triplets shook their heads. "We all did," Caleb said. As they walked away, the city buzzed around them, alive with possibility. They were Caleb, Eli, and Noah triplets, brothers, survivors. Their story wasn't just theirs anymore. It was a beacon for every queer kid fighting to be seen. The rain-soaked alley where they'd once stood, broken but defiant, was now a place of triumph. They'd bought back their silence, not with money, but with truth.